Welcome to a recording of a PD session I did on reducing grading time. This session was held in the summer with a group of teachers. My name is Melissa Schwab. I'm a secondary literacy coordinator and instructional coach. I've been working in the field for a few years and offer optional summertime PD for all of our staff. You can find me on Twitter. You can access my live binder by searching my name, or you can email me at my school district email. When we gave this session, there were 3 main points that we covered in the agenda, including talking about specific strategies for reducing grading time, grading philosophies that will guide your grading, and then we had a grading roundtable with the session participants. The rest of this video focuses primarily on several specific grading strategies that you could use to reduce your grading time. If you have any questions, my email will appear at the end of the slideshow. Feel free to reach out to me. Thank you and enjoy the recording.
So, first thing we're going to do is talk about some specific grading strategies. Some of these are ones that I've tried. A lot of them are ones that I've learned about since I stopped teaching, and they make me want to go back into the classroom and try them. I mean, seriously, want to try them, especially the very first one. So we'll take a look at them. So this first one is called in-class grading conferences, and I think you can use this in a lot of ways. This would definitely be for larger assignments, assignments that the kids have worked on over time. So in-class grading conferences sounds like this impossible thing, but it's really very fascinating, and I would love to try it. So basically what would happen is that when a kiddo had finished their paper, they would give you a copy. And there's 2 ways to do this. You can do a cold read in-class grading conference or a warm read in-class grading conference. All that means is that in a cold read, when the kiddo sits down with you, you have not seen the paper yet. And I think you could do this with lab reports. You could do this with projects. It would be for bigger assignments. So cold read, the kiddo has already read it, of course, but you have not. You're seeing it for the first time. Warm read would mean that the kiddo did turn the paper into you and you have at least read through it one time, but you have not graded it at all. So that is basically how it starts. You can do that cold read or warm read. So then you also, when you sit down with the kiddo, you each have a copy of the rubric as well. The kiddo reads the paper out loud, or you guys can both read it silently, but it's nice to kind of have the kiddo read it because then they will hear a lot of their mistakes when they read it out loud, and they will hear when things are weird or awkward. So that's going to put them in a better place for the rubric part, but you don't have to read out loud. You can read silently. As you're reading, you can make notes, things that you notice, etc., and then you both go through the rubric together. You basically grade out loud with the kiddo right there. And you say, if you have a rubric, whatever one, I'm giving you this because of this. I'm giving you this because of this. And you are grading it right in front of the kid. And then you get to the bottom and you say, and you're going to get a whatever on this, 89% or A or B or however you grade. And then the kid can respond. They can ask why. They can ask questions. And they even talked about how, sometimes the kid can say, well, I did this because of this. And you may even negotiate the grade. But basically, you are doing the grading together, right there. They say 10 minutes. 10 minutes tops. You put a timer on. You make yourself get to that. The rest of the class is going to be doing other work. So some different things that you can do. If you use stations in your classroom, the kids can be at stations when that's happening. Of course, you're not going to get all the kiddos through in one day, depending on how long you have. If you're on a 90-minute, you could get maybe 8 kids done. If you're on a 50-minute or you have an hour, you could get 6 kids done in that time. And we're going to talk about another strategy later that actually pairs with this really well that would make that part less overwhelming. But basically, the grading is all just happening right there in class. And then they could be, like, I thought about it, if you use, like, for you or for an English teacher, if you do silent reading or you do independent reading, you can do it during independent reading time. If you have experiments or something that they're doing where you're just pulling kids and they're not doing experiment for that 10 minutes while you're working with them. Of course, if they're going to blow each other up, you probably have to watch that. But, you can kind of you organize your classroom so that there's more independent work happening so that you have time to do these conferences. So that's the basic strategy. You would not take any papers home, essays basically, or longer projects. You could do it with all different kinds of things that they're creating. Anything that uses a rubric, you can do this with, anything at all. Okay, so what did you notice? What did you notice about this strategy? What stood out to you?
I like the part where you're like sitting and talking to the kid, because I use rubrics, a handful of times throughout the year for these bigger projects, and like I'll be filling out the rubric, but like, okay, are they going to understand why I gave them this score instead of the higher score? So I like that they're getting that immediate feedback of, this is why I'm giving you the score, and then they also have a chance to explain, well, and I kind of like the part about negotiating the grade too. So, because sometimes I go back and forth, like on a rubric, I'm like, and compare to other work, and I like that part.
And getting the kid involved also gives them ownership. So the more ownership your kids have, the more empowered they're going to feel, and also the more they're going to care. So if you do use revision as a part of your process, if the kiddos are involved here, and they're hearing you, and they're also inputting, and they are helping in some ways to come up with it, of course you have final say, then they may be more likely to revise.
Well, I wonder if it would make their original work better, because they know that they're going to have to sit with you, and especially the reading out loud part, to read it to you out loud, and because you'll have kids who are just like slop through it to get done with it, not really putting a whole lot of effort into it, and I would think, I like school, so but I would think it would be embarrassing for that kid to like sit with you and read out loud this work that they just didn't put any effort into.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. What else did you notice or think or wonder?
That this is totally doable.
Yeah.
Because at the end of every English unit, we have a writing assignment.
Absolutely.
And there's rubrics for that.
Absolutely.
And instead of me bringing home a stack, and I'm just the opposite. I want to dive into it and get it done so I can check it off.
Right.
Put it off.
Right.
I want to get this done.
Right.
So just having a kid sit there with you in 10-minute tops.
Yep.
Yeah.
10 minutes. And what you're going to see today, I'm hoping, is that when we look at these strategies, is you can actually use several of them at the same time. And so we might talk a little bit about how this combines with some of the other things that we're going to talk about. Any other questions or wonders or notices? Anything else you think wonder?
The only concern I would have about it is depending on the maturity level of your students. Because I've had certain classes where the kids doing the independent work cannot do it independently, even though they're supposed to be. And I think like it would work for certain groups of kids, probably most groups of kids, but I've also had experiences where it absolutely would not, because they couldn't manage themselves on their own.
And then that comes in the question of, okay, so we are starting to have a conversation about, here's what I'm trying to do, here's what you're doing that is getting in the way of that. Or one of the things that I think we can do, and you're right, there's some classes where maybe not, but maybe if we just keep training, it's okay, this is the problem I'm having, I want to do this, I think this is valuable, you get a say, but this is happening out here, and throwing it back to the kids and having the kids help come up with solutions. What do you think we could do? And maybe it's not a conversation that you're having, because you're not going to get the kids to speak up honestly. Maybe you give them a survey of some kind, or you do that as an exit ticket, or maybe you can have the conversation. I worked with a teacher last year who was having some class management issues. We turned one class around significantly by, I sat with them and I said, here's what's happening, here's what we need to happen. How do you think we can make that happen? And they were speaking up, and we had conversations, and we used some survey too, and it took some time, but we put a lot of the decision-making power, this is another PD I really want to do, in with the kids.
Right.
And so I think you're right. You sometimes will think, oh my gosh, I've got this class that they couldn't handle stations, or they couldn't handle independent work. Well, they can't now, maybe, but what kind of training we can do? How can we get them empowered? How can we make that kid that's causing all the problems actually be our helper to make sure everybody's on task? Like, how do we figure out to make this work? Because I would say if your choice is okay, my kids can't work independently, so I'm just going to grade all the papers, or let's find a way for them to work independently. We're going to find a way, like, you know, and figure out what it is. And it may take half the year to get it right. The majority of it actually goes back to what kind of classroom are we going to run? Are we going to run a teacher-centered classroom or a student-centered classroom? Are we running a classroom where we're doing most of the thinking, working, and talking, and learning, by the way, or are we going to run a classroom where the kids are doing most of that? And you can't talk about one aspect of what you're doing in the classroom without thinking about how it links to the others, and all of them go back to your underlying philosophy about education. And I will say, a lot of these sounds really good when we look at them on the board, but you're right to bring that up, because in practicality, in reality, you will have to deal with that. You will be dealing with kids that want to wreck that independent time because they don't want to work or they don't. So yes, it's doable, but it's probably not going to work great the first time you do it. You have to do it lots of times, you know, and figure out what works for you. Any other See Think Wonders on this one? Okay, so this is actually one that I started doing this, and I would highly, highly recommend this. So when kiddos are doing a project, we usually think about it, and you actually said it, you know, we're doing a writing assignment, or we're doing some kind of lab, or we're making something or whatever, and it's all due on the same day. So everyone turns in their paper, and you have them all to grade at once. So one solution is to give a due date range instead of a due date. And this is something that works pretty good with big projects. So, for example, if I had an essay due, I would tell kiddos, okay, we're done working on this in class on Tuesday the 23rd. So you can turn this in anytime between Thursday the 25th and May 1st. You know, so they have 5 days to turn it in. So what happens is then maybe I get 4 papers on the 25th, and 5 papers on the 26th, and 3 papers on the 27th. And so if I get that, think about that in combination with conferencing. So and you can do it to where you have the kids sign up too. You can actually do a clear timeline of the project for the steps. Like, okay, first draft is due here, or my project plan is due here, and my scientific whatever, I don't know, blah, blah, blah is due here. And, you know, and you can have kids sign up for when they're going to turn things in. And now they're in charge of their schedule. And they can put it in their planners, or they can do whatever, and they have due dates that they're going to hit. And then you know, hey, I'm getting 3 papers on this day, so I'm going to make sure I've got stations, and then you can do those 3 conferences. And then you're getting 4 papers the next day, so you've got that time planned out, and you know you can do 4 conferences. And now you're not overwhelmed with the number of kiddos, papers you have to grade. Even if you are taking them home, they're spaced out. The assignment that I really found that this helped me the most on was research papers. You know, when you're checking the kids' sources, and you've got, you know, you're doing your end of the work is a lot more. So I actually would give them a range of 2 weeks. And so then let's just say it was my juniors, and I had 50 juniors. Now I'm spreading those 50 papers out over 2 weeks. So I might get 4 or 5 a day. And now I can do it. Oh my gosh, yeah, now I can do it. I mean, because now even if I am spending 20 minutes on those papers, it's an hour that night, you know, and it's a completely different thing. So I would highly recommend this. You can do it. You can arrange conferences or grade as you go depending on the date. So you can either have the kids sign up for dates ahead of time. I would say I would highly recommend that, rather than just saying, okay, you can turn them in anytime within the next 2 weeks, and then you don't get any for the first, you know, and then, you know, if you can kind of manage it, and you can even say, like, okay, I'm only going to take 4 a day, first come, first serve, you know, and then, right? So what I love about this is that giving kids a due date range differentiates for how your kids work. Because you have some kids that are like, I want to get this done. Oh my gosh, it'll be so awesome. I'll be the first one, and it's all finished, and oh my gosh. And then you've got the kid that's like, needs to put it off, right? I'll do it at the last minute, you know? And you can even say, now this is another conversation, but I was very much about revision, right? So I would tell them, you know, you have this 2-week window. If you want to revise it, go ahead and turn it into me early in the window, and you have until the end of the window to revise it. So they might turn it in 2 or 3 times in that window. And that's okay. I mean, that was part of something that I thought was all right. But again, I wasn't overwhelmed with it because the papers were spread out. Okay, what do you see, think, or wonder about this one?
I do something like for those English papers. I teach it for a week, and then they go to computer class,
Yes.
and then they have that period to type it in LA format. And I realize 4th graders, they're not all going to get it typed.
Yeah.
Some of them do, some of them don't. So I always make it do like sometime like later the next week.
Yes.
So that way they can take it home, the finishing touches.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, I give them a due date.
Yeah.
But a lot of times some kids, well, I have it done. I got it done in
Yeah.
computer class.
Absolutely.
But I like the idea of the in-class grading conference because then it's not,
No.
they can argue with me
Yes.
if I'm, you know,
Yeah.
like grading them too harshly. Like,
Right.
no.
And you'll hear it
I've had
too.
certain things where I will be grading something and then I'll have a kid, like when I pass the work back, they'll ask, well, why did you take this points off? And I'll look at it and I'm like, you know what, you're right. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have taken off points
Right.
for that.
Right.
And I'll give it back. So I do like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, them being able to.
Yeah, so combining those two
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
like absolutely, it would make the conferences more manageable because you wouldn't be trying to get them all in on one day, you know, or like, okay, for the next 2 days, all we're doing is conferences, read,
Yeah.
you know, and that's hard because independent time and station time takes planning too. So if you're spreading it out, it's less, you know, maybe like in a 90-minute period over the next 2 weeks, 30 minutes of every period is independent. Well, that's your homework time anyway.
Yeah.
So you would already have that in there, and then you're just choosing to do conferencing while they're already working. So that would be time that you would already have. Anything else you see, think, or wonder here?
I like the differentiation aspect of it, but maybe for a little bit different reason. I teach high school kids who are busy people.
Yeah.
And I think something like that could really help them learn about time management.
Absolutely.
So, like, if you have them sign up for dates and they look at their schedule, like, oh, I've got like 4 volleyball games this week. I'll sign up for one
Yes.
next week. Or I know next week's really busy. I'm going to get this done and get it out of the way, you know, before I know I'm going to be slammed with stuff. So.
Yeah, and scaffolding, you teach them that. So like the first time you do this, you put up on your PowerPoint or whatever a sample schedule and for Sally Smith, you know, and you have that conversation and you're like, okay, if I'm Sally and this is what my schedule looks like, and then I'm going to pick this date because or I see that, you know, there's no way I can work on this for these 3 days, so I'm not picking the day after that for my paper to be due. I'm going to do it before that week. And you can actually take this as a time, to help the kids learn time management. So now, not only are we doing an English assignment or a science assignment, we're also giving them life skills. So because we're putting more of the power in their court, more of the ball in their court, but we're not taking away. We're still guiding. We're still giving due dates. It's that balance of both. Anything else on this one?
I'm trying to figure out how to do, because I know like our English teachers will do like a focus on reading the first 20 minutes of class, which I think would be an awesome time to do like these in-class conferences.
It would be.
and things. Like, can I do that?
Well, I know you used to do those
but, like,
articles.
Science reading,
Yeah.
like, I've thought about doing that. Maybe not every day because it's
No.
but
Once a week.
Once a week or so, where
Fridays.
Science
Yeah.
Fridays or something. So.
Oh, Science Fridays. I like
There's
that.
like a podcast, like I think it might be an NPR thing. But
Yeah, I don't know why you couldn't do it with a podcast and then have them. They could record their thoughts or whatever in a Google Doc or Padlet or something where they could share.
No, that's.
Yeah, Padlet's the bestiest.
Oh, not a Padlet, but you
Oh.
said podcast.
Podcast,
Because
yeah.
I know, like some kids like to read, but other kids would prefer to listen.
Yeah, and maybe you give them options.
Yeah, like they'll find a podcast, science-related podcast to listen to.
Well, and then it's very easy to, okay, you read or podcast or whatever for 15 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes we're going to share. And you can use See, Think, Wonder is such an easy tool for that. And the little graphic I had, you just print a bunch of those out, and they can just record on it while they're going, and then that's what they turn into you as the formative assessment for what they've done. And you wouldn't necessarily have to grade it, but then you would have, this is their collection tool. And I like to pair See, Think, Wonder with Think, Pair, Share. So you have them do their See, Think, Wonders, and then you have them turn to a partner. And I really like the snowball effect, where you have two of them talk, then you put two pairs of two together, then you take your pairs of four together, and then eventually the whole class has had the discussion. And that's just a nice way to kind of use that so that they're working independently, then they're sharing in small groups, then they're sharing as a class, and you have evidence of their brains working. Because that's really what you're looking for. Did their brain work? All right, so of course this actually goes with the other two as well. This is called limit your scope. So I know one of the problems I especially found early on with grading, and I think this could be true with your lab reports or a poster project or an essay, is that I wanted to grade everything. I wanted to grade every grammatical error. I wanted to grade every writing problem they were having. I wanted to grade everything. That's where the time really comes in. So what you can do is you can pick one or two aspects of the assignment to focus on as you grade. So, okay, this is the first assignment of the year. The standards that we looked at, we really looked at transitions and introduction. So that's all I'm grading. I'm actually going to read the whole thing, but I'm really only going to mark, edit, and make comments on and give you a grade on these two aspects, or these three. If we're doing a lab report, we're looking at the scientific method, and we've learned about hypothesis, maybe I'm only grading the hypothesis this time. So we're really not grading the whole thing. We're just picking parts. If it's an assignment where they're doing equations of some kind, maybe you only grade a few of them, not all of them. They did them all, but you're only grading 3, 5, and 7, because those are the ones that really reflect the skill that you taught in class. Because what we need to start thinking is, when we're grading, we're not just grading to grade. What we're doing is we're determining if they're mastering the skills and concepts that we taught, and do we need to reteach, or are we ready to move on? So how can we grade just the stuff that will tell us that? And of course, you're clear with the kids overall, okay, yes, you're writing the whole thing, but your grade, 90% of your grade is the introduction paragraph and your transitions. Or, 90% of your grade, I'm going to pick 3 questions. And you wouldn't have to tell them ahead of time which ones those are going to be, but you know that. We're only taking a grade on 3 or whatever. And now you've just limited your scope. So if you do take them home or you are conferencing, now you've limited down what you're going to talk about too, because, okay, we're just having a conference on, we're talking about the introduction and your transitions throughout. So now 10 minutes is plenty of time because we're not talking about every single error that you did. Another way to do this is to actually pick one part of the assignment and go very deep into that one part. So especially if you are working on some kind of, like, say, I don't know, specific thing that they're doing that they would do repeatedly. Grammar is an easy example for this. Okay, I am not going to edit your entire paper, but this 3rd paragraph, I'm going to mark every single thing you did in this paragraph. And then that's going to give us a feel for what you did. Instead of marking every comma in every paragraph, you're just in that one place. Or if there's something scientific that they're doing, you just pick one section to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to do this as you think of kind of how the year goes, right? So like at the beginning, the first thing you want is you really want them to just understand how to make a good hypothesis.
Right.
So on the first few lab reports, you may just be grading that and making sure they're filling everything else out. And then, procedure becomes very important. So, okay, this time we're really just going to look at that. Same thing with the writing, like, okay, at your grade, well, we're looking at this paragraph, but we're really just making sure they're all sentences. We're really just, we've got specific things we're looking at. So limiting the scope is an option. Anything that you see, think, or wonder about this strategy?
Well, you're talking about big projects, but could you also do this like with math?
Absolutely.
You teach the lesson, but, there's so many questions on the homework that's reviewed. And then I'm like wondering, like with parents, because we have so many parents that sit down with their kid, and they help them with every single one of them. Well, that took us an hour to do, because like every night it's 30 problems.
Remember, you don't have to assign them all.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you know your kids and you're using formative assessment, and you know where they are,
Right.
they may not need all that review. So maybe you pick 2 review, and you pick, or, it's kind of like we talked about last week, right?
Yeah.
All right, you tell them, okay, this is your assignment, but I want you to spend 30 minutes on it. So they get as far as they get.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these, the homework and the grading really go together, right?
Right.
Because it's again, like we were just talking about, it's philosophy.
Yeah.
What are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to see what they've learned and where they are so we know how to adjust our teaching to meet their needs. So when we assign homework, that's why we're assigning it. So we need to be intentional about what we assign so that it gives us what we need and no more, no less. And then when we're grading, same thing. We're grading in order to help us know what they know so we know how to teach.
Right.
So, yeah, they don't need, and I think in any of these changes that you make, just like we talked about last week, transparency with your parents is super important. So there's letters going home. Parents are going to have to be trained too.
Right.
Hey, this is what we're going to do. This is why. This is what it's going to look like. Don't be spending more than this amount of time. Those kind of things need to happen. And what do we really want? Do we want to do 30 math questions that are all at the same level, or 3 that really make us dive deep? No?
Right.
What do we want to do? What best serves the kids in terms of learning? Okay, so the next one is another kind of similar thing, but it's called grade in pieces. And this would definitely be for long-term projects. And Wendy, I can see this working especially on, say, the first lab report of the year or any kind of long-term project. So for this, they actually are going to turn the project into you several times, and you're going to grade specific sections as they are completed. So I will use the essay as an example for this because it's easy. So we're teaching the kids to write. We teach them how to write the introduction. They write their introduction. They all turn their introductions in. You grade all the introductions. This is actually nice because it puts more grades in the grade book if that's something that your school is worried about.
Yeah.
So, okay, you grade that introduction and it's just worth 10 points, and you grade all the introductions. But it's just the introduction, so it takes, whatever, just a couple of minutes for each one. Then you teach them body paragraph number 1, and they write body paragraph number 1, and you collect all the body paragraphs number 1 and you grade them. So you actually just grade pieces as you go. So they turn in all their hypotheses and you grade them. And the nice thing is, what this does is then you don't get that paper or that lab report that's 100% wrong at the end.
Yeah.
Because you've been seeing it every step of the way and making corrections. And again, there's a lot of different philosophies on, could they revise the things that you graded? Do you actually put a score on there, or are you just giving feedback? There's a lot of different things there, but you basically are grading the project as you go. If you're doing some kind of project-based learning where the kids are making something or building something or presenting something, again, I need to see steps 1 through 2, grading those, giving them back to you. You can revise them now 3 and 4, but then you're not ever having that one sit-down session at the end where you're grading all of it, although you still could have a final conference where you're looking at what they've revised. And this is kind of this final thing, but you've already seen the paper several times, so it's not going to take you very long. So grading in pieces is a nice option for long-term projects. What do you see, think, or wonder about this one?
Well, I'm really interested in the idea of the Genius Hour.
Yeah.
And letting the kids have
I have a ton of stuff on that.
We were talking about this
Yeah.
on your live wire. I need to check this out.
Oh, yes.
But I just haven't really taken the time to figure out how to implement it in the classroom yet. And this I think would be really, really good for that.
It would. You could have specific steps they have to complete and checkpoints, and then you're grading them along those checkpoints.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I love the idea.
And even if it's not specifically like Genius Hour, like having them do some
passion
kind
project,
of like quarter-long or semester-long project where they're doing this extended research, because science is not. I mean, my master's degree took me 3 years. It was a research-based master's degree. Like, it took that long to do my research project and collect the data, analyze the data, draw conclusions, write it all up. And, I think that's important. And I think that's an important skill. And again, with the soft skills, like life skills, like it's an important thing for students to be able to stick with a long-term project like this. But I like this.
Well, and if you think about life, college, but not all our kids are going to college, just life. Like, you never have a teacher standing there telling you, okay, this is due this day. Like, they have to learn to do that. I mean, if you think about things like getting your car license, like the place sends you a thing and it says, okay, by the end of May you have to have you have to schedule that. You have to schedule the inspection. You have to schedule, if you have to give yourself time for things to go wrong, you have to give yourself time for you to show up at the DMV and it's packed and you're not going to stay that day. Like, there's all these things that you have to learn to do, and you usually learn about that by like doing it wrong. So why not learn time management and scheduling and all that in school? And the more relevant we can make the school experience and the more realistic we can make it, the better for our kids that it is. I would say as you're looking into the Passion Project, PBL is another way that you could actually incorporate the standards that you're actually teaching into your, you could do those two things together.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to look at that, I think. Okay, anything else about grading in pieces that you see, think, wonder? Okay. So this is called a single point rubric, okay? So it's not grading a single thing, but what it does is, you know how usually on a regular rubric you would have advanced, proficient, nearing proficient, basic, below basic. You would have 6 boxes, right, for each thing, and then you kind of have to read through them, and then you're circling, so what this does is it just really reduces what goes on the rubric. So the way that it works is that your advanced, or what you want, is what you would write. Okay, so like, introduction catches the reader's attention, clearly states the thesis, and leads the reader into the rest of the paper, whatever. That would be 100%. So that's what you put in the criteria. You put what you want there. Here then you have the proficiency levels just by number, and there's a key below, which makes total sense. Now you could also probably write what they are, but this keeps it simple. All right? Then what you're doing is you're just, and as teachers, where something fits. So like if this says hypothesis as A, B, C, D, all right? There you go. So then you read it and they partially met that. You just put a check mark in the 2 box, and then you give them feedback here, and you just write, well, the first half of your hypothesis was very clear, but the second was illogical or didn't connect to the first. And then you're done with that. So it's just a way, honestly, I think what it does is it makes the rubric a lot less intimidating to you and the kids, because it just has one box. Tells you, this is what I want. And then here you're saying, this is what you didn't do, right? So you don't have to have all those other boxes, and you're not sitting there looking at the rubric going, well, is this a 2 or a 3? Well, it says this word and this word. But like, if you simplify it, you know when you read it, if it met it all the way, exceeded it, didn't meet it, or partially met it. And then this just gives you room to make notes for the kiddos on the specific standards. So this is a way to kind of reduce clutter and reduce what you're looking at, reduce for the kids as well. I think this really sang to me because we use Lucy Calkins' writing, and her rubrics are very, very detailed and kind of overwhelming, and I think this would be a way to kind of reduce down for the teachers and the students just the amount of information that they're looking at in terms of grading. Okay, what do you see, think, wonder about this?
I love this, because I feel like the rubrics that we currently use, I find myself all the time writing in there. And you could set this up on your computer.
Very quick.
And just, Oh my gosh.
Well, I do. So I did, by the end of my teaching career, I was no longer doing anything on paper because the kids would turn into me. We use Hapara or Google Classroom or whatever. They would turn it into me. So I would be reading it on the computer, and I just had a tab open with a rubric. I typed it right in, and then I just attached, or sometimes I would even copy and paste my rubric on the end of their paper, and then back it into that.
When you get, and even when you give the assignment,
you
give a blank document that has
absolutely
the top or whatever, and then have that type
under it.
So that it's right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
So
can see this working. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I can see this working really well with the last 2 grading strategies that you just talked about.
Yeah.
You're limiting your scope. I mean, this would be a way to evaluate that.
Yeah.
And I like
These are the 3 things I'm grading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I like too when, like, on those really detailed rubrics, it's like they're a spot for feedback at the bottom, but I'll just say good job because I'm like so over
over it.
But I like this
specific.
feedback for the one thing.
Well, and it would be very easy to think to yourself, in every box I'm writing one positive and one negative, unless it's a 4, you know.
Right.
I'm putting one constructive criticism and one praise every time. And then you don't even have to do like a final comment, because it should all be there, and it helps you kind of organize it a little bit. You can also, if you'll Google single point rubric and look at the images, there are a lot. So, and there's a Rubistar is a rubric maker. You can actually make your own, but I mean, you can make this in sheets in 2 minutes, so, or whatever you want to do. Any other See Think Wonders on the old single point rubric? Okay, so this is a kind of another direction. This is student self-assessment, and we're going to spend a few slides on this one, so See Think Wonders, we'll go over them at the end. So for student self-assessment, you would provide an answer key, and there are a lot of different ways to do this. You could have them grade each other's, you could have them grade their own. Again, this comes to if we're recording a grade on it or not. But you could put the answer key up on the PowerPoint. You could go through it with them. You could have it in a folder. When they finish something, they pull the key. There's lots of different ways to do the key depending on how much independence you're giving the kiddos and where they're at. So then what you're going to do is you're going to provide guiding questions that walk the kids through self-assessment, reflecting on the assessment, and correction. And then at the end, one thing that you can do is have smaller whole group discussions so that everyone learns from the mistakes of each other. So this is a way where it takes the grading all off of you and it puts it on the kids, but it turns it into a learning process, because in all reality, that's what we're doing, is we're doing this to help them learn. So how do we make the grading process a learning process? I would say that this is one of the #1 most effective things I did near the end of my teaching career that really changed things. The way that we graded assignments completely changed. So say we had a grammar assignment, maybe they did it outside of class or in class or whatever, but then at the beginning of class, this was actually how we reviewed the skill. So we would grade the assignment. Sometimes they would grade their own, we would grade it together, but what we would do is after we graded it, then what I would do is I would start calling on kids, and I used a random picker app on my phone because I never took voluntary hand raising. I always just made, because I wanted everyone to be engaged. So I would have a kid, and I would say, what's the answer to number 3? And they would say it, and this would even be when we were grading it. And then I would call on another kid, and I say, do you agree or disagree with their answer? Why? And call on another one. Why? So now 3 kids have been involved in one question. So then I say, I'm sorry, the answer was actually this. Take a minute to figure out why that was the answer. So now I'm calling on a 4th kid. Why was that the correct answer? And so, do you agree with that? So now we've got 5 kids involved in one question. So even if I'm checking 3 questions, I now have 15 kids involved in the grading process. But you can definitely do this as individuals too. So this is the basic process. Now, as far as providing guiding questions, you can use anchor charts that you post up around the room so that the kids always know where to look if they forget the process they're supposed to go through. You can give them things to keep in their science notebook or in the front of their reading binder, whatever. And of course, I've got some examples of some things you can do for that. I have a link here to a self-assessment slideshow. It is all about self-assessment, how students collect their own data. It's slide after slide. So if you're interested in that, I know that's kind of different than what we're talking about, but I included the link there. But these are questions that you could adapt for after a kiddo does an assignment. So they finish the assignment, and then at the bottom of their assignment, maybe you pick 3 questions that they've got to answer down there after they grade it. What did I learn from this assignment? What did I do well on this assignment? What am I still confused about? What do I need help, etc. And you can pick which questions, but basically they would just write these down at the bottom of their assignment, or maybe you had a separate sheet, or maybe it was a Google form. There's so many different ways that you could do that. But these are the questions that would help them, after they grade, think about what they learned. Or I even would have the kids write down, which numbers did you miss? And then for each one, why did you miss it? And they would have to just, so we're adding in this piece that actually gets them to think about the process that they went through, what they do and don't know. And then you're not doing any grading. And then I also put together some steps for student self-correction. So let's just say that, it's independent work time, the kids have done something, and you tell them, when you finish this assignment, go get the key out of this folder, check your work. When you finish your work, I want you to walk through the steps for self-correction. And maybe, again, you have these on an anchor chart or you have them on a worksheet or somewhere that they've got them. And this is what they would do. First, they would analyze the incorrect answer, right? They would ask themselves what went wrong. Okay? How can I avoid this mistake in the future? So then they would just do that for each one that they missed. And then you would tell them your resources to figure this out when you're trying to answer these questions are your text and notes. So now the work that you did before you did the assignment actually becomes important. So how many times you give a short lecture, you've got the kids taking notes, and then they never look at those notes again. Well, this is how we get them to go back, and this is what they're going to have to do in college, and if they work on projects for work, something goes wrong, they have to go back to the research, figure out why it went wrong, how do we fix it. So now they have these resources, and you are the last resource, not the first. So they're going to go back into their work. They're going to try to figure it out from what they already had. Then if that doesn't work, they're going to find a knowledgeable peer, not just any peer. This takes training. And then if they still can't answer one of these questions, they can call on you. But you're the last resource, not the first. So, I mean, again, if you can kind of see where we're going here, we're creating a lot more independent work time by changing the way that we grade. That actually give us more time to grade the things we do need to grade. Because we're taking a lot of the work off of us and putting it on kiddos, but we're making it meaningful work that helps them learn. Any questions about the whole process of student reflection and self-assessment?
It's like takes what I kind of do with grading in class and takes it a step further.
Right.
Which I really like because I feel like that the correcting should be a learning opportunity and not just
going on.
Yeah.
So I feel like, when we're having to do a worksheet after every lesson and we're grading every worksheet, it's just reams of paper. It's just the steps that we're doing. So if we step that back and we're changing that, maybe we're doing the worksheet, but we are only we're grading questions 3, 6, and 9. We're deep diving on 3, 6, and 9. Now those become a learning opportunity, and we're not moving on until we're pretty clear that everyone knows why they missed 3, 6, or 9, how they could have done it differently. And so now it's about that skill. It's about that learning process. It's not about just going through the motions of doing an assignment just to do it.
Right. Yeah, they're learning from the grading.
And you definitely have to do this, you have to reduce the number of questions. You can't do that with 30 questions. You'll kill them and they'll hate it. You can only do that with a few.
Yes.
But you can really change. But the nice thing is, an element of this that allows for differentiation is if you're letting the kids grade their own, they're missing different ones. You say, okay, if you, maximum of 3, go through this process on. So if a kid only missed 1, they're doing it with 1. If they missed 5, they're only picking 3. So they're not punished for missing 5. Everybody's, but they might be different questions. Another cool thing to do that I did and I really liked, after the kids, we would grade something, I have a quick Google form, and it just had all of the numbers listed, and they would just click which ones they missed, and it would come up to me, and then I could see which 3 questions the majority of the class missed. We would deep dive together on those right there as a part of the learning. And so then now, if everybody missed number 6, I'm throwing 6 on the board. We're think pair sharing. What is so complicated about this one? And it just makes the learning more authentic. I think this process, again, it's not about the grade or the score. It's about the learning. So that's what where we're going here. Other things you see, think, wonder here.
Not specifically about this, but there's a saying or quote or something that I've heard frequently is that the learning stops when you give the grade.
That's where we get into our grading philosophies. Yeah,
and this is something where you can kind of, they're getting feedback and they're finding out what they did wrong, but you're getting past that.
Yeah.
It's all about the grade.
Yeah. It becomes a lot more, right? Okay, so that's kind of the end of the specific strategies. And like you guys have kind of noticed, those strategies all work together. And you could do 2 or 3 or all of them actually together to change the way that you grade and reduce the amount of grading that you're doing. So just before we move on, is there any question that's still nagging in your mind before we kind of look at like what you said, grading philosophies now as you start to talk. What I've done is I have pulled, I think, 4 articles out of my live binder. I've also got my tab for my live binder, and then I have a Google search that I did that has a ton more. So what I want to do is I want to give you about 10 minutes here. Pick an article. Maybe you end up doing more than one, just depending on what works for you. So we're differentiating a little bit here in that I'm giving you choice instead of having everybody read the same article. I'm giving you 4 articles, and then for my overachiever kid that would want to do their own search, I've also given them a search that they could do too. So this is another way when we're adapting assignments is we're making it's homework maybe. I mean, we're doing it in class, of course, but we're giving options. Like for my kiddos that can't pick, they're just going to pick the first one. So I made sure I put a really good article first. But then I also gave choice for kids that are going to want to do their own thing. Then I gave even more choice to the kiddo that wants to go outside the box. So you guys are my kiddos today. So pick an article. We're going to spend 10 minutes. So if you get done before 10 minutes, you can pick a second. We're see, think, wondering in your brain or on paper. And then we're just going to kind of share what you find. So we'll go for about 10 minutes. All right. So which one of you wants to go first? What you noticed from what you read? Tell us which one you read. Maybe just a short little summary of what it was about, and then what you noticed, things you thought about what you noticed, and then the questions you still have.
So I read the 4th one down. It says how one weird finding changed my perspective on grading.
Okay.
And I really liked it because it talked about I'm a science teacher, so the evidence-based stuff. And it was saying that research shows that so they were talking about grade only, grade plus comment, or comment only on student work. And it said, and this was the weird finding I was talking about, but that the comment only showed the most growth with the students versus which was a surprising finding because you would think that having both a grade and a comment would provide the most growth or show the most growth. So this teacher that wrote the article said that he saw that, and so he decided to do away with letter grades until the end of the term. So he stopped giving any letter grades. He was giving feedback only until the end of the term on all of the work. And then at the end of the term, the student and the teacher would actually sit down together, go over that student's portfolio of work, and then decide together on a letter grade which described the most consistent performance of their work. And they really emphasized the most recent performance because what was going on earlier in the term was learning, the learning process and practice and all of that. So I really liked it because I like I said, I'm a science teacher, and I like that it was that here's the evidence that says that the comments are what really makes the difference. It's very different from what I do or what any teacher at our school does. I wonder how you talked earlier about training parents, because I think if parents would see that there are no grades in the grade book until the end of the term, they'd be very upset. And I think the students actually would have a hard time with that too, because they want to know, okay, where do I stand? What grade am I getting? What do I need to do on the final or whatever at the end of the semester? So I really like the idea, but I wonder about how that would fit into our current school culture that is so focused on
it's changing the culture. You are changing it, so you're right. It doesn't fit. If you are interested more about this, I can tell you a couple of people that you want to either follow or research on Twitter and a blog to go to. The guy that has really pioneered a lot of this and is writing about his experiences daily, his name is Monte Syrie. It's Monte. His last name is Syrie. His Yrie. And his blog is called Project 180. So basically 180 days, he blogs about every day in his classroom.
Wow.
I think he blogs every day. It might not be every day, but it's like the titles of the blog are the day, like whatever day they're on. And he pretty much is on, this is his 2nd year of this project of going gradeless. And he covers a lot of these issues, like how do you communicate with parents? How do kids know where they are? He has all kinds of this is what my end of the year form looks like. This is the letter I send to my parents. The other person that does a lot of that, her name is Joy Kerr. It's Kirr. she has a lot of this is what's on my website, this is what I sent home to the parents at the beginning of the year, so a lot of that practical stuff, that it's what it's really about, they cover a lot of that. Some of them dive in on it. Some of them are the only teacher in their building doing it. There's also a group, and they have a chat. You can hashtag it. It's Teachers Going Gradeless is what it's called. And the hashtag on Twitter is hashtag TG2. And so that's a whole group. And they have chats, they have lots of posts. TG2, yeah, it's a number 2. Yeah, like TGG, I guess that's where they got that from. Super cool. I can tell you if I were going back to teach again, that's where I would go.